So, among some of the suggestions that I got regarding the whole MIDI latency situation was to have some kind of dedicated music computer that could run more, MIDI beefy hardware or something like that. So I decided to basically try putting the old sound card back into Tuxedo, because there's no real room for any kind of anything in Monolith right now. I need a new motherboard for that. But I also don't want to install a sound card like this, because the creative drivers weren't so hot back in those days, and I don't want that messing with my system files just to be able to play MIDI. Now, the soft synth that I was using, Virtual MIDI Synth, is great for playing MIDI files that are already recorded, but to record and play your instruments in real time without latency, the software is not really going to do too well. Meanwhile, this card had hardware ASIO support, ASIO, A-S-I-O, support back in the day. So I was curious of getting that back into service somehow. Unfortunately, it looks like Tuxedo is dead. I'm gonna find out what that noise is, but anything resembling a post? Or nope, just the drive blinking like an idiot. This is all it does. I've reset the motherboard to integrated graphics with a screwdriver, and it doesn't even get to the point where it initializes the VGA. Let this be a warning for those of you folks who think you can overclock to your heart's content, because this machine ran perfectly fine for years, except the Gigabyte board was a tad flaky, until I started goofing around with overclocking, and I think that's what accelerated its demise. So yeah, don't overclock main systems, folks. Experiment with side systems or other systems. But, these people that, oh, but I overclock and nothing's ever a problem. Look at those people who overclock all the time and talk about, oh, nothing ever goes wrong, I know how to do it. Look at how much they're swapping out their hardware. Are they swapping out their hardware enough that they won't actually run into any problems with overclocking? Because the systems they put the extra wear and tear on are out the door before they have a chance to see any of the symptoms. Yeah, I've been talking the whole time, and the thing's just blinking its drive like an idiot. Won't even initialize the VGA part of the posts. We can take stuff in and out of the RAM sockets and stuff like that, but I don't think it's going to make much of a difference. Internal power connectors have been reseated. Next! The noise is coming from the optical drive. Is there something in there? Nope, it's just a noisy drive. Not even initializing the VGA. And this thing was reset with a screwdriver. CMOS should be completely clear. It should be back to integrated video. Unplug the USB. Anything happen? Unplug the VGA. Makes no difference. Hard switch. This motherboard was never all that great in the first place. Good news is, I do know that Newegg has some AM3 capable boards here. If I want to, if I would like to indulge the fantasy that the Phenom 2 is still okay and it's the piece of junk motherboard that borked out. Any other power connectors that should be plugged in? Maybe the onboard, maybe there's a, I know the other one does it. I know the other one has a special power connector that's required for the onboard graphics to work, but I don't see that here. Nope. You know how in Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, when the machine didn't work for the first time, the guy was like, well, we found a nice way to make applesauce. I think I've just found a new weird way of having a fan.
Look, Mommy, no RAM!
This should cause a post code. Then again, so should no VGA. Let's plug the monitor back into the integrated VGA, which is supposed to initialize first. You know why? So, anyone else want to wonder why I stopped using Gigabyte motherboards? Oh man, This was never a good board to begin with. Oh, not even close. This was never a very good board to begin with. RAM socket 3 in particular used to be really flaky. Beep, 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 beep. No, I would get post errors from that, but now I'm not even getting anything. There is still kind of a fan. I just have it in pull mode for the Cooler Master cooler. The stupid part is, I imagine the Phenom 2 is probably okay underneath all of that. So, we could dismantle this and then make some plans to get a new motherboard that's backward compatible with AM3 processors. Get everything working again that way. I did mention that Tuxedo's likely future was as a Linux machine, and I think this would have a decent amount of horsepower in order to run some kind of modern Linux thing. But I'm not seeing, nope, no signs at all of any kind of, hey look, the CPU fan way down here. No signs whatsoever of any kind of extra power connector that we missed. Huh. Interesting. So as this thing sits here, not doing much else except creating a nice relaxing hum, let's reflect on how we got to this point. So I goofed around with overclocking, because like, hey, one last hurrah, see what performance I can squeeze out of this processor. This is a Phenom 2 1090T circa 2010. Great processor in 2010, by the way. It's a beast of a chip that still today plays ball with some low-end Core i5s. But not very many. I mean, today's Athlon chips are a little bit more efficient at that performance level than this thing was. But this board has always been a little on the flaky side. This Gigabyte UD3H, particularly with RAM socket 3, as you all know. But it had a good run. The big thing is that I was trying both CPU and bus overclocking, and I think that's where the problems started, because I mean, you can upgrade the cooling for your CPU to run at a higher multiplier, but when you're cranking up things up on the motherboard, though, how do you upgrade the cooling on that? Unless you upgrade the cooling on the North Bridge and South Bridge, which of course did not happen here. So I imagine the heavy use of motherboard overclocking had a lot to do with this thing dying. And here's the sad part. This iteration of Tuxedo is dead after a little over 5 years or so. But the shortest lasting computers that I had was the original HP and the Silver Bullet's original motherboard. Those had hardware problems, both of them. The HP had power supply problems, and the Silver Bullet succumbed to capacitor plague. So those were those were blatant hardware defects with either the design, the hardware, or both that caused those two to die before their time. At the very same time, I've gotten a little over half a decade out of this computer. The 2007 system seems to still post. I haven't tried it recently. The Core 2 Duo system, I think, will still work. And, of course, the 2005 system, I think, with the Athlon XP4000, or the Athlon 64, which I haven't started up in a while, but I think that one still works. I think I got it to post not too long ago, actually, if I remember right. So, those older systems still worked. But the one that I decided to do a lot of experimenting with overclocking, to the point where the motherboard started hard locking, I think I put it into an early grave. So the only thing that's lasted not as long as this is stuff with blatant hardware problems. So I introduced my own form of torture, basically, with my misuse of this board. But it had a good run. So, where this leaves me is, I'm thinking, though, since I do have this snazzy 16 gigs of DDR3 Ripjaw RAM, I'm thinking I should probably look for an AM3 compatible, backwards compatible, AM3 Plus motherboard. Because when the AMD Ryzen hits the market, I imagine the old stuff's going to get very cheap very fast. So, Tuxedo, I think, is going to end up as a Linux machine. Maybe I might get a Kinguin key to put Windows 10 back on it, but I want to redeploy my old sound card somewhere. And unfortunately, my former main system, that was already fleeking out when I retired it last summer, isn't going to be it. I think for the sake of neatness and whatnot, I'll leave the old board in here until the replacement arrives. so I can keep the Phenom 2 in some kind of setup like this. I'm not going to take the Phenom 2 out there. I want to see if the new board works with the Phenom 2 before I really start. I want to see if the new board works with the Phenom 2. I'll bet any money that Phenom 2, even though I partially delidded it when I was trying to get it off of the stock cooler, back when I upgraded to aftermarket cooling for the first time, the Phenom 2, I'll bet the Phenom 2 still works, and it's the motherboard that flaked out. But this is something that we can save for another day. Monolith is perfectly fine, and I have plans for the other computers now that this one has kicked the bucket. Right, enough rambling and watching the fan not make a lot of noise because they're fractal fans. Tuxedo is dead. The Delosaurus isn't the only computer we've lost this week. Tuxedo is dead. I'm curious, though, if I can replace just the motherboard to get this back into service. Time to do some Newegg shopping. It is Techmas with them, after all. But I gotta pay the bills for last month first before we go making any new purchases. This is MultimediaJay signing off. Thanks for stopping by. But at least I managed to get this old power hog down to 70-something watts before it kicked the bucket. Woohoo!